So now we have a 2016 Volkswagen Golf, and it's here for a hard start, cold, and extended crank time, and running rough and stumbling after starting. It's apparently been checked by the dealer, and they've been told that it needs a turbocharger. So I'm going to do a code scan on this thing and see what codes it's got in it. And then we're going to look at some data parameters and start it up. We got a turbocharger boost control position sensor circuit. Now I understand that they disconnected the turbo to check the play in the shaft, so these could be self-induced codes. Now this rich at idle, that's a problem. We're still doing the network scan. We've got 9 controllers now. Function limitation due to compressor switch off by engine. Heated seat. The radio is being tested. Okay. Saving the report. So I'm not going to clear these codes just yet. I'm going to go back and into engine management. Continue. We're going to make a custom data list. And engine control. Snap-on divides the data list up into sectional data lists. Well, I'm going to build a custom data list to look at here. Trying to build a custom data list, and I only see misfires on cylinder number 1 in this data list. I don't see 2, 3, and 4. There's so many data parameters now. Snap-on, you need a keyword search, or let's try the cylinder information tab. Oops, click it once. There's cylinder 2 and 3 and 4. Alright. List view. And we want to look at engine speed and rail pressure status, long-term fuel pressure actual. High pressure fuel pressure actual in PSI. Okay, I'm about to start this thing and you'll hear way it acts. Oh, this time it started awesome. Well, an hour ago it didn't do that. It cranked and cranked and cranked and cranked and stumbled and stumbled and stumbled. And I had 100 bar of fuel pressure, which is around 1500 PSI. Now I see I got 900 PSI. Now I got to 2900 psi. Why is that actual high pressure fuel pressure so high? I wonder what long-term fuel trims are doing. Right now, not much. Well, I'm going to look at this data and see if I see anything that stands out. Well, now it's loading up. Long-term fuel trims at negative 21%. Fuel pressure is down to 1322. But negative 35% fuel trim. Wonder if this thing's got bad injectors in it. Negative 42%. It's over-fueling for some reason. I think we're going to check the injectors. So I'm going to watch the fuel pressure now. It's running about 1400 psi, which to me seems high. I didn't see a parameter that showed desired fuel pressure. This one is, unless this is desired and this is actual. Low pressure fuel is 159. That seems high, but I don't recall ever checking low pressure fuel pressure. To me that does seem high though, usually like 40 to 60 psi on the low pressure side. But the desire, if this is desired and actual, they're within 50 pounds, 100 pounds of each other. So I'm going to shut it off and turn the key back on, or ignition back on, and see if this fuel pressure climbs after a hot soak. So I turned off the ignition. Of course the engine's not running now. And the heat from the engine should cause the fuel pressure to increase in the rail. It is going up, but so is the, I think these are both the same data parameters. I don't think that the one on the right is desired. I think it's just a different way of displaying it for whatever reason, being displayed twice in the data list. Because it should not, if it was actual, it should not be increasing. Now, just because it is increasing slightly here doesn't mean that one or more of the injectors isn't overfueling. I'm going to try building a custom data list and see if I can get any other data parameters. Well, the misfire counters show misfires on all 4 cylinders, but that's to me because it's overfueling. Fuel pressure actual, and I found another fuel pressure PID. Rail pressure regulation status, high pressure specified PSI. There we go. So that to me would be desired, and actual is 2140. As you can see, it's climbed right up. Let's see how it restarts. Barely running. It actually stalled. To me it seems like fuel is seeping in through the injectors. You heard it crank, and crank and crank, and it's like it's flooded. So I'm going to pull the spark plugs out and have a look in there. So there's number 1 injector. And looking at the valves in here, it looks pretty nasty. Look at the carbon on the intake valves. Wow. Let's try another cylinder. Turn this thing. For whatever reason, the dealer put a high pressure pump on it. Are you looking at the back? Yeah, I'm looking at the back. This borescope. Let me get set up here. Back in number 1 here, and this does look wet. This injector does look like it's seeping. I wonder if I can zoom in on this. Look at that. Well, there's definitely carbon in the valve for sure. Look at the underside of this intake valve. Let me turn it so that you can see it. Like, it is terrible in there. So I think I'm going to recommend a set of injectors and intake walnut shell blasting. Okay, let's clear the codes. Let's see if they're gone. I'm not sure if that's going to reset the adaptives, like the fuel trims. Don't know if they have a functional test for that. Special function. No. Won't be an actuator test. No. Let's go back into engine management and into data, cylinder information data, and I have to build a custom data list again. So I decided to put VCDS on this thing because it's easier to search through the 400 data parameters. High pressure fuel actual is 87 bar and desired is 88 bar. This thing runs pretty high fuel pressure at an idle. I cleared the codes and that reset the fuel trims, but you can see that the long-term fuel trim is going -25, -28. It's been gradually creeping up. So I think it's definitely overfueling. It looks like the one or more of those injectors is seeping when we shut it down, and that would account for it being loaded when you start it up. But the intake ports are just filthy with carbon, so I'm going to recommend a set of injectors and walnut shell blasting the intake ports. I'm going to log this data so that we can see after the fact. 30% negative fuel trims. So let's see if any codes came back yet. Not yet. But those turbocharger actuator codes, I think, were generated by the shop disconnecting something on the way in to look at the turbo shaft. I don't think there's anything significantly at fault with the turbo. So I got those injectors in today, so I'm in the process of removing the intake manifold. There's a bunch of plastic pieces you can take off of here to access the air filter housing, remove the air filter housing, because there's some fasteners that you have to get on the side here. There's a challenging brace down here. This brace that goes from the intake manifold down to the block. It's a triple square bolt in the block. You can barely see it there. So I'm going to try and access it from here with a universal joint. Got all the Torx bolts out of the manifold. Wiring harness is disconnected on this side. Vacuum line. Fuel line disconnected and capped. Oil filter removed. I'm going to change the oil obviously on it while we have it apart. It's just this brace that's holding it now. This brace here. So again, I'm going to go try and reach that nut or that bolt down inside there. So that brace is using an M10 triple square bolt, and you can get it through here with a bit and about a 4-inch extension. Now there is a brace on the fuel line right here, and you can get that through here with a T20, and this should be theoretically ready to come off. Well, that was fun. One thing you do have to do is undo the cam sensor on this end. I imagine that's a cam sensor because the manifold hits the connector. I ended up taking the high pressure fuel line off before I pulled the manifold off because it seemed like it was interfering with the bottom edge of the manifold here, but I could be wrong. There's a plastic nipple you have to undo here going to this intake manifold runner control vacuum servo, and of course all the connectors have to be removed from this bracket. These two slide out. This one here I couldn't figure out how to get it off, and it ended up breaking the little plastic clip, but that's minor. I thought of undoing this, but there's two fasteners. This one you can get at easy, but this one here is not so easy. So there's the manifold off. Let's have a look in the intake ports. Looks rather nasty in there. Yeah. So next is the high pressure fuel rail. These two Torx bolts here, and disconnect the electrical connectors and pull the injectors out. So here's the injectors. Bought them from the States. Bosch fuel injectors, new. And we're about to clean the intake ports. So there's number one intake valves cleaned. You see that walnut shell blasting does a pretty good job. There's a little bit left on the back side of that valve. I'll pick that off. But all together that looks pretty good. Well, there's clean intake ports. Does a good job, that walnut blast. It's a little bit of a pain in the ass. Could be better. The fixtures for the intake port could be better. But nevertheless, it's clean. I'm going to clean the gasket surface now and clean around the injector seals and put a new set of injectors in it and put it back together. Well, I'm not a happy camper. Back together and running, but not running well. It's still running extremely rich at an idle, and it's still hard starting. And the carbon on the valves is not affecting it, or not as bad as it could have been. Let's have a look at some data. So I'm back this morning with a couple of ideas. One idea is that it may have a leaking high pressure fuel pump. The dealership that worked on the vehicle before me actually swapped this high pressure fuel pump for another one, and I don't know if this is the original one or another used one, but it's definitely not new. I'm wondering if the high pressure fuel pump could leak and the PCV system draw the fumes off before they end up in the crankcase, because there isn't gasoline in the crankcase because I just changed the oil. It does run better with the oil filter cap off, but that makes it run lean, and that might be offsetting the rich condition that I have. I posted a case on the diagnostic network last night, and several people suggested some things, including the high pressure fuel pump leaking. One mentioned to take it off and pressurize it with the fuel line here and see if you notice it leaking or seeping. Now, I know it's not producing high pressure at the time, but it'll be about 5 bar of fuel pressure in the low pressure side, and if the seal is leaking, it might seep. I might do that yet this morning, but another person linked me to a Rostec file with the known good values from a running engine, key on engine off, cold idle and a hot idle. So I looked at some of the data, and the one thing that stands out is that my high pressure fuel pressure is almost double what that vehicle was running, but it's desired and actual that it's around 90 bar. So I'm going to look at some of that data now and then look at it on the VCDS scan tool. So here is an example of a 1.8. I guess it's an Audi. I guess I could tell by the VIN number. If I scroll down to here, I could probably tell. Yeah. The key on engine off, looking at cold engine data. One thing that threw me off yesterday when I was looking at this data was the low pressure fuel system PID, and my low pressure actual fuel pressure was 11 bar, and the desired was actually, see, this one here is 11 bar as well. I don't think this has a low pressure fuel sensor, so that's probably a bogus value. Low pressure fuel specified value 5 bar. That's what I have when I looked at it. Now, for the life of me, I don't know how this person recorded all of these data parameters in VCDS, unless they did them individually and then added this together, because normally VCDS only allows you to look or log 12 data parameters simultaneously. But I'm going to look at cold engine idle, high pressure fuel pressure specified value, that I would take as being desired 60 bar, and one of these down here will be actual high pressure fuel pressure. I should print this off. Maybe I'll do that. Well, that was painful. 28 pages of data PIDs. I don't know how this person was able to record and log all these data PIDs simultaneously unless they did them individually and then put them together. So I printed off a cold idle one, but it was 24 pages long. Like I said, here's the hot idle. High pressure fuel specified 41.5 bar. Let's go into VCDS now. And engine RPM. Low pressure fuel actual. That one is 11 bar. High pressure fuel actual 6.9 bar. It hasn't run. High pressure fuel pressure specified. See, why is it 128 bar? Like, if that's to me seems high. But that's programming. It's super rich at an idle. Unless this vehicle that we're looking at here, high pressure fuel specified 41 bar. Mind you, this is key on engine off. Maybe that's different for when it's running. So we're gonna look at air mass specified value. Fuel temperature shouldn't be significant. Let's just see what it is. 18 Celsius, that's reasonable. That's what it's warm in the shop. Intake manifold running control, crankshaft RPM, rail pressure regulation status, control operation, fuel metering valve. I imagine that's the percentage of duty cycle for the pressure regulator. Fuel type, that should be gasoline. Time since ignition off, minutes. See what that says. 12 hours, yeah. I was working on it this time last night. That's bang on. Fuel pressure control deviation. Okay. The difference between desired and actual. I'm going to start this thing in a minute and you're going to hear it. Maybe it's going to start because it's cold. Where's Where's intake manifold pressure? No, I don't want that one. Well, I'm gonna pick some more. Okay, so I've got engine speed graphed and actual air pressure, or actual fuel pressure, high pressure is the green, desired is in blue, and that's, where is that? How come it's not showing that? That's the deviation right there, dark blue. All right, well, I'm going to crank this thing and see how it starts. So now it looks like our desired pressure, 199 bar, 200 bar, fuel pressure actual value, specified value 200 bar. That's ridiculous. Why is it so high? Intake manifold pressure is 0.8 bar. That looks reasonable. Now it's running about 95 bar, 98 bar, 100 bar. Let's go back and pull up some additional PIDs here. Looking for fuel trims. Look at the long-term adoption is going negative like crazy now. I can't have more than 12 data parameters. We have to get rid of something to bring the one more up. I wonder how that person was able to record the entire data list. You can hear the way it's running. It's rich, stumbling, misfiring randomly. Fuel metering is at 11%, if that is the pressure regulation valve. I wonder what happens when I unplug the pressure regulator. Okay, I got the pressure regulator unplugged. My pressure fuel specified value is 7 bar and actual value is 7 bar. That doesn't make sense. They're still running like crap. And now it's smoking like crazy. Ever since I pulled the oil filter cap off, it started smoking like blue smoke. That doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. Well, I think I'm going to pull that high pressure fuel pump off for what it's going to take. So I got the high pressure fuel pump off. It's still connected. Electrical plug plugged it back in. And ran the fuel pump in the tank. Got about 85 psi. And I don't see anything leaking here. Gonna let it sit for a few minutes. I had to put a fitting on the end of this, obviously, and I decided I might as well put the pressure gauge on it. Well, just let it sit. So I decided to take the roller follower out and look at it, and it looks pristine. No signs of wear. You can see the cam lobe is at the top right now, so I'm going to turn the engine by hand to put it down to the bottom. Well, it's been 25 minutes and there's no evidence of any fuel leak. Now mind you, that's only at 90 pounds or 85 psi, so that's nowhere near the operating pressure of this pump when it's actually working. I rotated the crankshaft to put the plunger at the bottom of its travel in the base circle of the cam, so it should be easier to bolt this pump down. Put some grease on the seal and we'll put it back together again. Well, I'm at a loss. I don't see evidence of the high pressure fuel pump leaking. I don't understand why the desired and actual fuel pressure are so high at an idle. I'm going to try it at a fast idle. Well, I held the throttle open with a long screwdriver against the seat, and you can hear it cycling between 900 and 1200 RPM. But note the fuel pressure now is down around 50 bar, 60 bar. I really don't know what's going on with this thing. It's killing me. I'm watching what it's doing with the fuel trims now. They're at negative 42%. I wish there was a way to test that high pressure fuel pressure sensor, but it's under the intake manifold. You can't even get to it. So there it's running at 1000 RPM. You can see it's at 54, 55 bar. Let's see what fuel trims are doing now. So the short term, now I just cleared the codes at which resets the fuel trims. You can see the short term numbers at negative 22%, even at 1000 RPM. So it acts like it's overfueling. There's no fuel in the engine oil. I just changed the oil. The purge solenoid is not leaking. I tried pinching it off. Wow, this thing's killing me. So I even got it running on an alternative source of fuel. Low pressure fuel is around 85 psi. We've got a injector flusher hooked up with clean gasoline in it, and it starts and runs the same crappy way. So to add insult to injury with this thing, since I disconnected the battery yesterday when working on the intake manifold and injectors, reconnected it. I never boosted it or used anything but a clean battery charger on it. I've got an active fault code B116816 for steering angle sensor not initialized. And you can see the status here. It says not initialized. I'm going to try and initialize it, I guess. It says security access required. So go into 16. 19249. to it. Access granted. Basic settings. Steering angle and sensor initialization. Security access required. Well, just lovely. I'm going to take this thing for a road test. So I tried rotating the steering wheel to the left and right twice, as per the instructions to reset it without the scan tool. I'm going to shut it off. Wait a few seconds. See if it'll restart. No throttle response. And it didn't relearn the throttle position or the steering angle. Oh, lovely. Just come back from a road test. Finally got all the warning lights off on the dash. Fuel trims off idle and light throttle cruising are around 3.9% negative. And you watch the fuel pressure when it comes down to idle. Initially it starts out at about 58, 60 bar, and then it slowly starts climbing up to 70. You can hear the engine loading up. And you can see the long-term fuel trim going negative. Now I'm wondering if that high pressure fuel pressure sensor is falsely reporting the fuel trim, or falsely reporting the pressure. Because if you recall, when I disconnected the pressure regulator, both desired and actual, specified value and actual value, unless they're both the same, both showed like 7 bar. I shut it off and started again. See, it won't start. Barely running. It's like it's not getting any fuel. Yet it's saying there's 80 bar of fuel pressure. There's no way to qualify the actual fuel pressure with a gauge because of that rigid steel line. I think it would be cool if we, well, mind you, it's 2500 psi, so it's sketchy pressure to deal with. But I got a pressure transducer that goes to 5000. I wonder if I could get another one of those high pressure lines and weld a fitting on it so that we can put a high pressure gauge on it, pressure transducer. That time it started perfect. You can see it accelerates good. Well, it hasn't set any fault codes yet, but I'm sure it's going to, and it's not right. I got no way of checking the actual high pressure fuel pressure to compare it to this. And I'm really starting to wonder if that actual fuel pressure and specified fuel pressure are both the same PID being displayed in different ways. Especially when I disconnected the high pressure regulator and they both you would have thought the desired or the specified PID would have still been, say, 100 bar. I'm going to go after that high pressure sensor. There's going to be a part 2.